I'm Dan Curry with the Deeds of God website, and this is part of the continuing 6-day series. Today the discussion will be quick about two different parts of the body that I believe contain images of holy things, and that's the premise of the whole 6-day series, that man's structure, man's anatomy is made to not only function, but to contain images of holy things. I've become convinced of it, but it's subjective. It's allowed by the Bible in that they say we're fearfully and wonderfully made, that we're made in the image of God and Jesus was God, that our body is a temple, but it's not specified by the Bible that it means this. However, it's just something I've come to think may be true, so I'm sharing it with other Christians. Here's an example of how when a Christian kneels in prayer, there ends up being a cross and a leaning figure and a leaning figure. On the Ark of the Covenant there was two leaning figures, and in between was the mercy seat. Once a year the high priest of Israel would go put blood of animals there to atone for the sins of the Israelites, but only for that year. We believe that Christ was the once and all time atonement, and so his shed blood on the cross, if you imagined it over the dish between two leaning figures, would be the only required atonement blood of all time. You know, from his point on, no further blood necessary, no further blood could equal it. So when we pray, we have our shoulder blades and our spine, and sometimes that will make a suggestion of a cross. And inside of us, our kidneys lean forward almost like curved leaning figures, and they have to do with purification. There is a church which is a witness for Christ, you know, in the East and the West. Though we're supposed to be one unified church, but we have become, you know, to some extent a divided church. But you know, you think of a witness on the east, a witness on the west, or at least a witness on both sides of the cross. You know, these have to do with purification. We can't see them, of course, they're inside of us, but if you could see as God sees, you know, we'd at least be able to see this and who knows what else. On the back of the neck are 3 lines. Sometimes people have 3 lines on the back of their neck, and that would be a match for the 3 lines above the cross. I suppose 3 lines in a belt. The bottom of the belt, top of the pants could almost be 3 lines as well, but maybe that's not quite the same quality idea. So here comes the second part, just the idea that it may be that our bodies are meant to also represent the passages of time and at least the succession of empires. It's from the 2nd chapter of the book of Daniel, when he interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream about the metal colossus, the large metal man-shaped figure that was in a dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. And Daniel ends up, you know, conferring with God, asking God what it means, and God explains it to him so he can tell the king. And what it ends up meaning is that the head of this colossus is the current kingdom back at that time in the, say like the 600 BC time frame. It was Babylon. But the colossus changed from gold, the head of gold, to, you know, chests and arms of silver, and God told Daniel that represented the next kingdom that would come. It ended up being Media and Persia. And then there was another color after that. The metal in the midsection of this colossus was bronze, and it ended up being Greece, which succeeded Media and Persia. And then around the legs area, the beginning of the legs, it was a terrible iron kingdom, and we know that Rome succeeded Greece. And Rome actually divided in its early centuries AD into an Eastern and a Western Roman Empire, and they lasted different lengths of time. But let's just say that the legs represent the Eastern and Western Roman Empire, or whatever form it took in its continuation, and that there are vestiges of it even down to the end of times. Then the knee area would be somewhat close to the middle. And this is not scalar. You know, Babylon at 600 BC would not have been equidistant from, you know, the pelvis, let's say Rome's time, at only 600 years previous. It would not be equidistant to the feet, which apparently represent the end times and have to be at least 2,000 years from the beginning of whenever it was Rome, because, you know, our present time is 2000 AD, and Rome actually encompassed Christ's time. So it's not scalar, if there's anything to this at all, but perhaps it's representative, you know, event driven. But about halfway between Rome and the feet, which I believe represent the end times, are our knees. And there's an interesting thing that happened about halfway between the Roman Empire and now, is in that the church officially split, the Christian church. Rome and Constantinople fought a lot. They began fighting over supremacy and dominance in the geographical areas. And I think from what I've read that Rome was especially eager to become, you know, the highest of the powers over all the church. But, you know, Constantinople may have had its own ambitions. But right about this area, you have a circular idea. But after that, the two bones divide. You know, the tibia and the fibula divide and travel on down to the ankles. They do touch at the knee, where they first divide, then they're more or less separate. And then they do touch at the ankle, as if almost recombining, but they don't actually recombine. You know, they just sort of become more intimate. So, here's a story. When they were having these troubles between the churches, and they began to become more and more exacerbated by issues that came up, in the year 1054, a papal bull was sent by a pope, Leo IX. He sent a delegate named Cardinal Humbert with some people, and they traveled to Constantinople to try and work out these issues. And basically, there was a bull of excommunication sent with them. Now, a bull is just a communication from the pope. They're called papal bulls. But as they traveled, something took place in the sky. The light suddenly appeared from an astrological event. You know, we ended up having the Crab Nebula pop into visual existence. You know, who knows how long the light traveled, right? But as they're traveling, the Crab Nebula shows up in the constellation of Taurus, which is the bull. So there's a bull on its way to split God's church. Big event in heaven and on earth. Well, in the astrological sign that's the bull, a crab shows up. They ended up naming it the Crab Nebula. And a crab is single body, but two arms which kind of oppose each other. They come out and oppose each other, right? And its eyes are up on poles. Its witnesses are on poles. You know, a crab's eyes are on those little stems. So that's almost like, you know, the church's witnesses sometimes end up on poles, you know, crucified. But there's a few things that were interesting about that, because it happened just as the event was unfolding. The ambassadors had been sent. When they got to Constantinople, they couldn't reach an agreement with the patriarch named Cerularius. He is like the Pope of the Eastern Church, you know, at that time. They called him patriarchs. And so, at any rate, not reaching an agreement, the delegates walked into a mass and slapped down the papal bull on the altar, and then walked off, and they even shook their feet off on him afterwards. The Pope had excommunicated the Eastern Church. So the Eastern Church quickly excommunicated the Western Church. But odd as it was, this this Crab Nebula showed up in the sky just at this time in the constellation of Taurus. Well, then you have the lower legs continuing down, and they start to touch again, again at the bottom, where they reach the ankle. Well, in 1965, this schism, this anathematization that occurred in 1054 on July 16th, it was sort of ended. The Western and Eastern Church agreed to end the schism, or the anathematization of each other, although they did not exactly reunite. It's sort of like when Jacob and Esau became united again. They made some nice words with each other. They kind of made up, but on the other hand, they didn't exactly get rid of their hierarchy structures and become one unified church. Well, I don't know. It's kind of that way with the bones of our legs. Down at the bottom of whatever time frame this would represent, if it does indeed represent any time frame at all, down at the bottom they become cozy again, but don't exactly unite. Speaking of the two legs, bones, the lower bones of the bones of the lower leg. But anyway, that was 1965 when they went as far as they did go. And as for our feet are kind of interestingly biblical in that they have 26 bones per foot, which means 52 total, and 52 is an important, fullness of time number because of the 52 weeks in a year. 33 joints per foot, 66 total. 66 is a number that seems always associated with God's people being rescued at the last possible moment, in that they fled Jerusalem in 66 AD, the Christians did, and therefore weren't destroyed by the Roman conquering in 70 AD. Or 66 people came to join Joseph in Egypt to escape the mighty famine that was destroying everyone else. And 66 accompanied Jacob to come see Joseph, and it says that in the scripture. And there are 10 bone structures and toes in our 2 feet combined, and there's supposed to be 10 end time kings. And if you look at a nail, it can look a little bit like a beard and hair, like a knight's head, a chainmail knight with a little beard, and I just put 2 eyes there, but the nail can look a little like hair. So I don't know if that's representations of 10 end times kings, but there's an arch. It can have some, I don't know if this refers to arch enemies or anything like that. I have no idea. And of course soles are on the bottom of our feet. And soul has become an important word in the English, meaning the I guess you would call it life programming, the personality programming that each human holds inside of them. Even though it's spelled differently, it means a different thing. So human legs, kind of important. Human legs seem to have some significance that you could at least attribute to them scripturally, although it's subjective. I'm Dan Curry. This is a Deeds of God website presentation, continuation of the 6-day series. Thank you.